Almost a word. I was 24 years old and not married, and that was old for those times. I was working for a man as his housekeeper, and I worked hard 6.5 days a week. He gave me a couple of hours off on Sunday to go to Mass. It was a steady go to keep up with the work. I hauled water 5 times a day and used an old flat iron heated up on the back of the stove. One Sunday after Mass, the old man told me to keep on my good dress and to wait a spell in the kitchen. So I sat down on the daybed with my hands folded in my lap and waited. Before long, a man came in, and he took a chair by the door, and him and the old man started talking about weather, fish, and old schooners up the bay. The young fellow never looked at me, and he never spoke a word to me. Then he got up, and they shook hands and said goodbye. The old man said the young fellow's name was Bill, and that he worked on the Labrador. He said he came home in the fall of the year to take care of his old aunt, who was going to leave him the house when she died. He told me that Bill was dependable, never drank, and always paid up his accounts. I said to myself, well, that's all very well and good, but what's that got to do with me? Well, the exact same thing went on the next Sunday, and the Sunday after that. On the 3rd Sunday, I tell you, I was in no mood to go sitting around like a bump on a log, listening to the two of them. So, I don't know, I must have tapped my foot or cleared my throat real loud or something, because Bill looked over at me and said, "Would you like to be going for a walk up the road with me?" Well, in those days, you never went walking alone with a boy unless you were hooked up with him. Oh, it might be all right to run into a few fellas if you were with a pack of girls. You might call out to one another. But I knew something was up when he asked me that. So anyway, we walked up around the church. He never said a word. When I said, "Lovely weather," he kicked at a rock, gentle-like. He was never rough. That kick seemed to be almost a word, almost a conversation. We were coming back down around when Harry O'Keefe came out from behind a shed and started walking alongside me. Bill moved in around the back of us and wedged in between myself and Harry. "Move over, Harry," he said. "She's my woman." Harry went on then, and Bill walked me home. When we got to the gate, he took a ring out of his pocket, and he put it on my finger. "There you go, love," he said. "We're engaged now. We'll get married in the fall when I get back off the Labrador." Then he put his hand in his pocket again and drew out an envelope and handed it to me. "There's a bit of money in there. Buy yourself a nice suit and a hat to get married in." So that's what I did. We got married the next fall, and we stayed married for 50 years. He was never much of a man for talking, but that suited me just fine. Going around with Bachelors. That night your sister came round to my back door with the November wind lashing her long black hair around her face, and her talking through her hair to me was the first time I met her, and she was telling me to come to you because you were pouring everything liquid down the drain. You had your mother a prisoner of fright in her own home. And I went following your sister out into the pitch black because the storm knocked all the lights down. Her saying you had an aeroplane ticket to Sweden, the land of free love. "What does that mean?" she asked, leaning into my arm. Me traipsing after her up the ladder to the kitchen window because you'd barred all the doors. You standing at the sink looking over your shoulder at me, your mother with the rosary beads pulled tight across her knuckles and hoping I'd be the ticket to you stopping all you were doing. You saying, "Since you left me, I'm a free man now." And me saying, "Peter, you're free, yes, and all of us your captives. Hand me over the tin of milk. Hand me over your passport." And Jesus, I swore then I'd never go around with another bachelor. Homecoming to the end. That way he had of looking over his glasses at me when I tried to say something matter-of-fact, but knew I wasn't pulling it off. He wouldn't say anything, would never answer right away, just go back to his paper and say it to the print, matter-of-fact. I told him I was going to marry a sailor and go away. He said, Go away? To where you know no one? That stopped me, made me lonely before I'd made the steady plans. It's your life, and you can always change your mind, he said. He made it difficult to rebel. Years later, he rowed us across Southeast Arm. With the sail up, the air felt softer on the skin. The mind relaxed into a carefree sinking. The open canvas flapped in the wind, billowing out like a blossoming magnolia. As he coasted us in, I trailed my hand through the water. Then the plunk, plunk of each oar hauled over and placed inside the boat. Dad cut off a thumb-sized slice of tobacco. You can row back, he said, if the tide is right. If not, I'll take her, or we can wait till the tide turns. I thought, how odd for him, his daughter gone away and come back with a southern accent. I remembered that line from Gone with the Wind, where the black servant says, I don't know nothing about birthing no babies, Miss Charlotte. I changed that around to, I don't know nothing about rowing no dory, Daddy. But he wouldn't get the joke. Besides, we never joked. Joke was an American word, like cookie and divorce. I sat transcribing ballads from cassette tape to page. He leaned into the door jamb of my bedroom, listening to the songs about people he knew who had died in gales, or sly youths who had gotten away with something. I'd say, What's that, Dad? What's he saying? He'd look over his glasses at the machine. Clamp to hold to, he'd say, or two-buckle spring in your knee. A grin spreading into silent memory. I'd imagine him leaning on a wall at a dance, waiting to make sure he picked the right girl to ask. Mom said, Your father would wait till the end of the night to ask for a dance, right when you thought he never cared for you. A hard man to figure out. But he was never hard. No, his curse word was Judas. His temperament even, his pace full and steady. At his wake, a man took my hand and said, Your father wasn't a man you prayed for, but prayed to. I turned away. I didn't want him made into a saint, a man unreachable. I wanted his prejudices, his blind church-going to meet my sinful life of drinking and manizing. I wouldn't let him get away from me that easy. He wouldn't rise at the right hand of anyone. So I lay in his bed the night he was buried, remembering his hand in mine, us going for ice cream. Mom banged on the door. Come out, you'll drive your nerves bad. Come out and join the party for your father. But I lay there surrounded by his few clothes hanging, the smell of beaver plug, the crucifix, the blurred and moving Blessed Virgin dissolving into the bleeding heart. I lay there with his words and stories, ships hove into rocks, St. Pierre wine in wooden casks, the whaling factory in Rosaroo. Words I clung to, knowing his passing took away a world. In the morning, before dawn, a light touch on my head, a blur of white mist in the room, the faraway words trailing off. Get up now, and let me rest. Go on and help your mother now. I threw back the blanket and stumbled into the grey light of day. I, Solemn. My mother scrubbed my face and braided my hair. She told me to put on my dark blue corduroy dress, the good thick one from Aunt Mary. She laid the crescent of hat on her head and stuck a long white pin with a pearled end into it. And her head? It went in so deep, but she didn't jump or cry out or even wince. What she did was pull the veil down from its fold until it rested against her nose. And gloves, hers black and mine white. You must be very serious, and don't be scared. There's nothing to be scared about. It's only death, and death can't hurt you. She took me by the hand and closed the door behind us and turned the key. It was my first time for death, I was thought big enough. So we walked down Swan's Road to Mrs. Corrigan's. The sun was all hallelujah and gave the grass that warm green smell. My friends were swinging in the playground singing Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini that she wore for the first time today. Look straight ahead, my mother said. Be solemn. And I was, although my shoes pinched. I looked at the clouds moving fast in the sky above and felt that shiver of life when it holds you and shakes you between not knowing and knowing something. Men were outside the door smoking cigarettes with tams pushed back, dressed up like Sunday. One man moved himself off the door frame and said, Alice? Mom said, Frances. Inside was like going into dark night. The room was full of women and 2 nuns. Along the back wall, a long, black, shiny box, sleek as a trout. There were rosary beads on laps and faces flattened with sorrow. Up. I was swooped up and held above the box, and inside was the meringue of a lemon pie and a woman laying in the meringue. Not really Mrs. Corrigan, who used to yell and chase us with the broom and tell us we should be tied to the clothesline. She was far away, tired and cold. Kiss her on the hands, my mother whispered. My lips felt pink. Her hands felt white. On the floor again, I was given a triangle of ham sandwich and a saucer of hot, sweet tea. She's a grand good girl now after going to a poor soul's wake. And all the women smiled sorrowfully at me, and I solemn as could be. The Laying Out, 1956. Wash the corpse, put on the habit, put the pennies on the eyelids, the prayer book under the jaw, fold the arms with the rosary beads entwined around the fingers, stop the clock, turn the looking glass to the wall, knock him on the forehead with the hammer to make sure he's dead. To Boston. We were going down to O'Keefe's, myself and Paddy Corcoran, when he got turned from the idea and took the path back up the hill. I went ahead on my own. I figured I'd go in for a spell and have a look. And when I got there, I saw the dancers were having a break, and you fanning yourself with your head thrown back, laughing at Mickey Houlihan's profound fucking wit. Outside, I inhaled the night's sharp smack, hugged the coat around me, had a smoke at Kitty's Pinch, where the sound of the water trickling was no comfort, and I thought, as I flicked the butt into the bog, ah, Christ, tomorrow it's the boat for Boston, and leave her to Mick, and have her wondering, whatever happened to Ag Welch?